The bell above my small bookstore's door chimed as my cousin Marcus strutted in, designer shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. I suppressed a sigh, already knowing why he was here. The annual family dinner was tomorrow, and he always made a point to check in on my little project beforehand. Emily. Still keeping this quaint establishment running, I see. His voice dripped with condescension as he surveyed my carefully curated shelves of books, his lips curling slightly at the handwritten recommendation cards I'd placed throughout the store. I continued restocking the classics section, letting his words roll off me like they had for the past 5 years. Hello, Marcus. Looking for something to read? He laughed, the sound echoing through my cozy shop. Oh no. Just wanted to make sure you're still coming to dinner tomorrow. Mom insists on having everyone there to celebrate my latest acquisition. Ah yes. Marcus had recently become the retail director at Landmark Properties, one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the city. He hadn't stopped talking about it since he got the position 3 months ago. I'll be there, I replied, climbing down from my stepladder. Just need to close up here first. Speaking of closing. Marcus picked up a book, barely glancing at it before setting it down in the wrong place. Have you considered my offer? This space would make an excellent juice bar or maybe a high-end nail salon. I could help you get out of your lease early. I bit back a sharp response. Marcus had been trying to help me sell my bookstore ever since I opened it 5 years ago, convinced that physical books were dead and that I was wasting my business degree running a dinosaur of retail. The store is doing fine, Marcus. Actually, we had our best quarter yet. He raised an eyebrow, glancing around at the quiet shop. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not exactly rush hour for book buying. Really? Must be quite the achievement. What did you make enough to cover your rent? I thought about the documents sitting in my office safe, the ones that would wipe that smirk off his face in an instant. But not yet. Patience had gotten me this far. Something like that, I said mildly, straightening the book he'd misplaced. Was there anything else? Just looking out for family, Emily. I mean, this whole thing. He gestured vaguely around my store. It's cute. But let's be realistic. You're 32, single, running a tiny bookstore in an age of Amazon and Kindle. Don't you want more from life? The bell chimed again as Mrs. Henderson, one of my regular customers, entered. She smiled warmly at me, then frowned slightly at Marcus's loud voice. I have everything I want, Marcus, I said quietly, moving toward Mrs. Henderson. Now if you'll excuse me, I have customers to help. Customers? He snorted, looking at the elderly woman. This is what you gave up a corporate career for? To help old ladies find large print novels. Mrs. Henderson drew herself up, clutching her handbag. I stepped in quickly before she could respond. I'll see you at dinner tomorrow, Marcus. He shrugged, already heading for the door. Sure. Though you might want to dress up a bit this time. The people attending, well, they're more used to a certain level of sophistication. After he left, Mrs. Henderson put a gentle hand on my arm. Dear, how are you related to that horrible young man? I smiled, leading her to our mystery section. He's my cousin. And don't worry about him, he just doesn't understand that success comes in many forms. Speaking of success, she lowered her voice conspiratorially. Have you told them yet? About everything? Not yet, I replied, pulling down the new James Patterson she'd been waiting for. But soon. Very soon. After Mrs. Henderson left with her books, I retreated to my office and opened the safe. Inside were the documents that proved I owned not just my little bookstore, but the entire Highland Mall, the very property Marcus was so proud to be managing for Landmark Properties. 5 years ago, when I left my corporate job to open this bookstore, my family thought I was having a breakdown. What they didn't know was that I'd spent years studying market trends, property values, and retail patterns. I'd seen the potential in Highland Mall when it was struggling, its outdated shops closing one by one. While everyone else saw a dying mall, I saw opportunity. Through careful investments and a series of shell companies, I'd gradually acquired ownership of the entire property. The bookstore was just the beginning, my way of understanding the retail space from the ground up. Now Highland Mall was thriving again, its renovated spaces filled with a carefully curated mix of local businesses and national chains. And tomorrow at the family dinner, Marcus would announce his big plan to save the mall, completely unaware that every proposal would need my approval. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Me at 18 standing proudly in front of the mall's entrance, back when I worked at the pretzel stand during high school. Marcus used to come by with his friends, making fun of my uniform and boasting about how he'd own places like this someday. Well, cousin, I thought, carefully returning the ownership documents to the safe. Sometimes life has interesting ways of teaching humility. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Everything set for tomorrow's revelation? Yes, I replied. Time to show my family what a tiny bookstore owner can really do. I arrived at my Aunt Victoria's mansion exactly on time, parking my modest Honda between Marcus's BMW and my other cousin Jessica's Mercedes. The contrast made me smile. If they only knew about the Aston Martin I kept garaged at my penthouse apartment. The house was already buzzing with activity. Marcus had invited several executives from Landmark Properties, clearly eager to show off his new connections. I smoothed down my simple black dress, designer, though not obviously so, and rang the doorbell. Emily. Aunt Victoria's voice carried across the foyer. We were starting to wonder if you'd make it. Her eyes swept over my outfit, lips pursing slightly. Everyone's in the dining room. Do try to network a bit, dear. There are some very important people here. I bit back a laugh, knowing that among the very important people was James Chin, CEO of Landmark Properties, who'd been secretly working with me for months on the mall's next development phase. The dining room was a sea of expensive suits and cocktail dresses. Marcus stood at the center, gesturing animatedly as he talked about his vision for Highland Mall. Behind him, a PowerPoint presentation displayed renderings of the proposed changes I had actually approved 2 weeks ago. Emily. Marcus called out, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. Come here, you might learn something about real estate development. I walked over, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. The small group around Marcus included James Chin and several board members from Landmark Properties. James caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. As I was saying, Marcus continued, Highland Mall has massive untapped potential. These small, independent shops are barely breaking even. We need to bring in major luxury retailers, high-end restaurants. Like that little bookstore? One of the executives asked, and I recognized Robert Phillips, Landmark CFO. Exactly. Marcus laughed. My cousin here runs it, cute little place, but honestly it's taking up prime real estate. No offense, Emily, but in today's market, physical bookstores are surprisingly profitable actually, I interrupted quietly. When properly managed. Marcus paused, clearly annoyed at my interruption. Emily, please. I've seen your type of operation before. You might cover costs, maybe make a small profit, but we're talking about serious business here. And what would you consider serious business, Marcus? I asked, taking a sip of champagne. Well, for example, he gestured to his PowerPoint, we're planning to convert that entire wing into a luxury boutique section. Obviously, we'll have to wait for the current leases to expire, but the current leases won't expire, I said calmly. They were all renewed last month. Marcus blinked, confusion crossing his face. That's impossible. I haven't approved any lease renewals. You didn't have to, James Chin spoke up, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Those decisions come from ownership, not management. Right, Marcus agreed, though he looked slightly flustered. And once the board approves my proposals. The board doesn't own Highland Mall either, Marcus, I said softly. The room had grown quieter, more people turning to listen to our conversation. Aunt Victoria hovered nearby, sensing something was off but not quite understanding what. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded, his voice rising slightly. Landmark Properties is the management company, James Chin finished. We handle the day-to-day operations, but we don't own the property. Marcus's face reddened. Then who? I reached into my purse and pulled out a slim folder. Perhaps we should discuss the actual ownership structure of Highland Mall. Emily, Aunt Victoria cut in sharply, don't interrupt Marcus's presentation with your, whatever this is. No, please, James Chin said. I think everyone here would be very interested in hearing what Ms. Hamilton has to say about Highland Mall's ownership. The room fell silent as I opened the folder. Highland Mall is owned by Phoenix Rising Development Corporation. I began, my voice clear and steady. A holding company that acquired the property 5 years ago through a series of strategic investments. Marcus snorted. And what would you know about Phoenix Rising Development Corporation? I continued, speaking over him, is a subsidiary of Hamilton Enterprises, which is owned entirely by me. The silence in the room deepened. Marcus stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Aunt Victoria gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. That's impossible, Marcus finally managed. You run a bookstore. Yes, I smiled. I do. I also own the building it's in, along with every other building in Highland Mall. Including the office where you've been working, Marcus. I pulled out the property deeds, contracts, and incorporation papers, laying them on the table. Would you like to see the documentation? The executives from Landmark Properties weren't even trying to hide their amusement now. James Chin stepped forward, addressing the stunned room. Ms. Hamilton has been an excellent owner to work with over the past 5 years. Her vision for Highland Mall's development has been instrumental in its current success. But, Marcus sputtered, why didn't anyone tell me? You never asked, I replied simply. You were too busy assuming you knew everything about everyone. Too busy looking down on small business owners to realize we might be more than what you see. The aftermath of my revelation was exactly what you'd expect. Marcus stormed out of the dining room, nearly knocking over a waiter in his haste. Aunt Victoria had to sit down, fanning herself dramatically with a napkin. The rest of the family alternated between staring at me in shock and hurriedly checking their phones to verify what I'd just revealed. This can't be right, Jessica, my other cousin, muttered as she scrolled through news articles about Phoenix Rising Development. Emily? Our Emily. I watched as the executives from Landmark Properties gathered their things, clearly ready to make a graceful exit from this family drama. James Chin paused beside me on his way out. That was quite a show, he murmured, smiling slightly. Though I suspect we've only seen Act 1. He was right. As the business people filed out, my family closed in, decades of assumptions and judgments crumbling around them. Why didn't you tell us? Aunt Victoria demanded, having recovered enough to be indignant. All these years letting us think. Think what? I asked quietly. That I was a failure? That I'd wasted my business degree? That I needed Marcus's help to escape my little bookstore? We were worried about you, she protested. Living in that tiny apartment, working such long hours. I couldn't help but laugh. That tiny apartment is actually the entire top floor. I own the building. As for the long hours, yes, running a bookstore while managing a real estate empire does take time. My Uncle George, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. How did you do it? Where did you get the capital? I sat down, accepting a fresh glass of champagne. If they wanted the story, they'd get it, all of it. Remember when I graduated business school? Everyone expected me to take that job at Goldman Sachs. Instead, I took my inheritance from Grandpa, the one everyone thought was so disappointingly small, and invested it in distressed properties. That was right after the financial crisis, Uncle George remembered, his eyes widening with understanding. Exactly. While everyone was running from retail, I saw an opportunity. I started small, buying individual store units in struggling malls. Then whole strip malls. Then 5 years ago, Highland Mall came up for sale. But that must have cost. Aunt Victoria began calculating in her head. 47 million, I supplied. Which I had thanks to my earlier investments. The bookstore was actually my last acquisition. I bought it because I wanted to understand retail from the ground up. Jessica collapsed into a chair beside me. So all those times we invited you on luxury vacations, insisted on paying for your dinner because we thought you couldn't afford it. I let you, I nodded. It seemed important to you to feel superior. The room fell silent as that sunk in. Years of patronizing comments, of pitying looks, of helpful suggestions about my career. All based on assumptions about my life that couldn't have been more wrong. Marcus chose that moment to return, his face still flushed but now with embarrassment rather than anger. Why did you let me make a fool of myself? All those presentations, those plans. Your plans weren't bad, Marcus, I said honestly. They just weren't original. Everything you proposed I'd already implemented or approved. Maybe if you'd spent more time actually studying the mall's operations instead of bragging about your position. He flinched. And now? Are you going to fire me? I considered him carefully. Do you want to keep your job? Yes, he admitted, looking humbled for the first time I could remember. Then here's what's going to happen. You'll start from the beginning, learning about our tenants, understanding their needs, seeing the mall as a community rather than just a collection of retail spaces. Prove you can do that and you can keep your position. Aunt Victoria, never one to stay quiet for long, burst out. But you're still running that bookstore. Why, when you have all this? I smiled, thinking of Mrs. Henderson and all my other regular customers. Because I love it. Because sometimes the greatest luxury is doing exactly what makes you happy, regardless of what others think it says about you. Over the next hour, more details emerged. My family learned about my other properties, my investments, the charitable foundation I'd established. They discovered that the small business owner they'd looked down on was actually one of the city's most influential real estate developers. I just can't believe we never knew, Jessica kept saying. You never asked, I reminded her. You were all too busy telling me what I should do with my life to actually ask me what I was doing with it. As the evening wound down, I found myself in the garden with Uncle George. Unlike the others, he seemed more thoughtful than shocked. Your grandfather would be proud, he said finally. He always said you were the only one who really understood the value of patience and hard work. He taught me well, I agreed. His disappointingly small inheritance came with a letter, you know. It said, Dear Emily, I'm leaving you less than the others because you're the only one who knows how to turn small into big. Show them what quiet ambition looks like. The next morning I opened my bookstore as usual. Mrs. Henderson arrived right on schedule, a knowing smile on her face. I saw the news, she said, settling into her favorite reading chair. I suspect you'll be having some family members dropping by today. Sure enough, throughout the day they trickled in. Marcus, Jessica, Aunt Victoria, each one seeing my little bookstore through new eyes. They noticed things they'd never seen before. The carefully curated selection, the loyal customers, the warm community atmosphere I'd created. Around closing time, Marcus returned. He stood awkwardly by the classics section where he'd been so condescending just yesterday. I've been thinking, he said slowly. Would you teach me? About property development, I mean. The right way. I handed him a book. Small Business, Big Impact. The Art of Community-Based Retail Development. Start with this, I said. And Marcus, next time you see someone running a small business, remember, you never know who might actually be writing your paycheck. That evening as I locked up the store, I looked up at Highland Mall's illuminated sign. My mall. My success. My story. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from proving others wrong, but from letting them discover how wrong they've been all by themselves. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, doing what you love and letting success speak for itself. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to James Chin. Ready to discuss that expansion plan? His reply came instantly. Absolutely, boss. Though I suspect your family might see you differently at the next board meeting. I smiled, pocketing my phone and heading toward my modest Honda. Let them see me differently. The truth was I hadn't changed at all. They had just finally opened their eyes. And that, perhaps, was the greatest success of all.